Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to wasmCloud Wednesday for Wednesday, June the 12th. Let me go ahead and share my agenda really quick and my agenda, our agenda. And we could take a look at what we're going to be going through today. So, what I threw up for the demo right in the beginning, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the wasmCloud Kubernetes operator. I know that this is something that we've talked about in previous community calls. We've talked about it a couple of times, like at the wasmCloud booth at conferences. But I don't know if everybody on here or people in the community have worked with the Kubernetes operator, may not understand kind of the context behind it. And I think it would be great to run through a quick demo of deploying the operator and then talk a little bit about it. And then from there, we can potentially show you a more advanced version of what that operator can deploy, what it kind of looks like. And then we've got some nice discussion items going on from there. I wanted to talk a little bit about tracing in wasmCloud because a couple of tickets have gone in and out this week if you're watching the repo. And then inspired by Liam's great suggestion to do a docs page of the week. I think we are just going to make this a formal part of the community call going forward. I wanted to highlight a good first issue of the week, something that came up and I think would be great for first-time contributors. And then the docs page of the week, we will highlight some new things that have gone to the documentation. So, well, it's pretty action-packed. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Zoom is still doing the really fun thing where it's being bad. So let me just go ahead and share my whole screen to make this a little bit easier. So everybody should be able to see my screen. I'm pretty much just going to be running through the README on the wasmCloud operator repository. So let me see if I can pull up uh, chat really quick. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and send this in the chat, but if you take a look at the wasmCloud org, wasmCloud operator is actually one of our pinned repositories now, which is super nice. Many things got consolidated into the mono repo. So for things like this operator, it's nice to be able to highlight that at a high level. And what this operator is all about is a methodology, kind of an opinionated methodology for deploying wasmCloud applications on Kubernetes. So for those of you who follow along in the wasmCloud ecosystem, we have this project called WADM. WADM is the wasmCloud Application Deployment Manager, and we essentially have a little reconciliation loop where we can deploy wasmCloud applications. However, at the end of the day, that doesn't really, Wadum is not responsible for provisioning wasm Cloud hosts. It's not responsible for the infrastructure layer. So ultimately, in the cloud native ecosystem, many people deploy on this project called Kubernetes. I'm not sure if you all have heard of Kubernetes. Just kidding. People use Kubernetes all over the place for the platform layers, whether it's something they deploy in a managed way or they use a managed service or they deploy it on their own. And what we really wanted to create this operator for is for a Kubernetes native experience for wasm Cloud and to essentially put forth the opinionated way that we think is the best to deploy WebAssembly on cloud native infrastructure. So I want to walk through the deployment of this operator. I'm going to do it all locally using Kind. I'm sure that most of you have heard about Kind, but if you haven't, it's Kubernetes and Docker. Super nice. Just runs a one node thing locally. You can run Kubernetes on your machine. Isn't that cool? So the first thing I'm going to do is go into the hack directory of the wasm Cloud operator and run this little script called run kind cluster. If we take a look at this script, actually, there's really not that much that it does. We are creating a registry container for kind. We're going through creating a cluster using kind with their cluster config. So this is basically just kind of wrapping the process of bootstrapping a local cluster. And this should work out of the box for you. I had kind installed locally. I'm pretty sure it doesn't do the install step for you, but that should be all that you really need to work through there. So with that, and I guess I can do everything from scratch. You can set your kube control cluster context to kind, we can see that, we don't have any pods deployed. We don't have any deployments deployed, no services. It's a pretty bare Kubernetes cluster, which is pretty nice. So if we take a look here, Justin, I'm just gonna throw you on mute. I didn't know if you meant to unmute to ask a question. Please do if you had a thing. Um, Going through, taking a look at this repository, the operator works all around this idea, this custom resource definition for a wasmCloud host. So we have a wasmCloud host config CRD. And in this CRD, you can define how many hosts you want to run, the issuer keys for cluster security in your lattice. You can specify a lattice to use. We're just going to use default, where to connect NATs to. This is essentially all the infrastructure information that you need to deploy wasmCloud. And I'm going to use the sample that's just included within this repo. So there's really not too much, not too much here to configure a cluster. I'm just going to run one host replica. We're running with one of the latest versions of wasmCloud. One thing that you should watch out for, though, as you're getting started, is the secret name. The secret is actually required in order to run this wasmCloud, the wasmCloud cluster, because the wasmCloud cluster seed is used to essentially do cluster identity between the wasmCloud nodes. So I also have this secret, and don't worry, this is a real secret, but I just generated it for this call, so copy it or whatever, all you want. So to start this process of deploying, the first thing we can do is deploy the secret. So I'll apply the secret, which is just a native Kubernetes secret. And then we can roll down through the README. And the first thing we'll do is we'll deploy the NATS Helm chart. So this is right from the upstream NATS Helm chart. So we're just deploying a NATS cluster inside of Kubernetes. And we're going to do that with Helm. So many people use this project called Helm. I don't think we have anybody on the wasmCloud team that's worked on Helm before, but if we could find someone, maybe we could direct your questions there. I'm just seeing if Taylor's paying attention.
Oh, I'm paying
So
attention, Brooks.
Of
I'm
course, the
also
joke being that Taylor wrote and implemented much of Helm v3.
the classic conference pitch is that if you have strong opinions about the weight flag in Helm, you should express them to Taylor. And this trolling should give me enough time to look the Nats cluster for vision, which is perfect. So this setting up this Kubernetes operator, if you've run wash up before locally, we essentially do a mini version of this infrastructure setup where we run Nats, we run Wadum, and then we run wasmCloud. So after the NATS pods are ready, Jetstream is configured, we can run Wadum. And Wadum, the application deployment manager, what it does is it'll connect to the NATS infrastructure that we have set up. And then it will be able to look out for new applications that we want to deploy and be able to monitor hosts that are connected here. So I'll install Wadum. That should launch up pretty quickly. Once the container creates, great. And what we can do from here, for example, is if we port forward, there's a service that's created as a part of the NATS cluster. We can port forward to 4222. And this is really, really useful locally to be able to use tools like Wash to query hosts, which right now we have none. We can list applications, which again, right now we have none. We could even run a version of wasmCloud locally and connect it to this NATS cluster. So I've actually just run this host, and it's running locally, but connected to my infrastructure in Kubernetes. All fun stuff. But that's not the exciting part. I just wanted to show an example of connecting to NATS and what you can do. This is a really useful way to debug when you have the operator. Speaking of, guess we can go ahead and deploy that operator. Like I said, I'm just kind of running straight down the README, so you all should be able to reproduce these steps as well. Once we create that operator, we can take a look at our pods. And as soon as, wait, which one did I do? I did deploy this with customize, which is the deploy base. And now that the operator is created, it's running in this namespace wasmCloud operator. The only thing left to do is to deploy this sample, which is our wasmCloud host config. So I'm going to deploy this sample, not wash, I am sample. This new host config essentially gets picked up by the operator, and the operator can use that information in the sample to create the wasmCloud pods in the cluster. So it looks like we've got one of our two up and running. The other two are just getting ready. Now we have our wasmCloud cluster. So if I do kube control get pods, we can see, I think that there's actually two in this pod. One is wasmCloud, and the other one is a Nats leaf node. And that is done so that these two containers can talk to each other, but the leaf node extends the Nats cluster, so everything essentially stays locally without going up to the Nats cluster. And this is a great example of if you were deploying outside of Kubernetes, how you'd want it to get set up. So from here, I can do something like wash get hosts, and we can see that we are running one here. If I output it in, oh, we don't support that. It's really messing with me, wash and kube control. They're too similar. We can see that this individual host is running in the client cluster, and we have this nice Kubernetes equals true value, which will let us know that it's running there. So from there, you can do everything that you normally do with wasmCloud. Since we're port forwarded to 4222, it's going to feel exactly the same as working on our local host. So if I go out to the wasmCloud example components and take something like the HTTP Hello World application, I can do a wash app deploy of wadm.yaml. If I take a look at wash app list, we can see that that starts reconciling pretty much immediately because that's on the Wadum side. We can take a look at the inventory of the host. See, now we're running our HTTP Hello World component and HTTP server. This one is on our Kubernetes node. And this is actually a part of the demo that I'd like to maybe phone a friend. So our Kubernetes developers in here, I have this wasmCloud HTTP server, right? But of course, if I curl localhost 8080 like I expect, I'm not connected to the Kubernetes cluster. What's the best way to actually get to this HTTP server? I guess I'm looking at Dan, but
You
I'm
want to
not
curl it
saying his
directly?
name. Yeah, I'd love to hit
Yeah,
this
if you
application to
port
send.
forward to that pod or the service that it created on port 8080, it should just work, right?
Okay.
Where
So
is
that's
where is the service?
so I can port forward directly to the
Yeah,
wasmCloud pod.
yeah.
How
For
do I
context,
port?
I was just gonna get into it, Bailey. So when in Kubernetes, right, you can effectively port forward to services or pods. So like Kubernetes has its own networking layer. But effectively what this does is allow you to forward traffic to a pod or a service and kind of bridge all that together. I use it all the time, particularly with Nats, for example, but it's nice for testing because you can kind of just like wire up a port and just straight up curl it. I mean, you could port forward in production. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you do you. I suspect in high compliance environments, you're going to run into some problems there. But anyway, it's effectively just SOCAT.
So yeah, that kind of concludes the section of the demo that I really wanted to do. And just to kind of go back through the steps that we ran through there in the README of the wasmCloud operator, we're essentially using all of the standard kind of tools that you would generally deploy applications onto Kubernetes with in order to like Helm, in order to deploy NATS infrastructure, which is arguably the most important piece of infrastructure for wasmCloud because it's our whole networking, RPC, and an API layer. Then we deploy Wadum as its own deployment so that it can manage, because Wadum can manage many wasmCloud hosts. It's just spreading applications across them. So we deploy Wadum to work with wasmCloud applications. And then we use the custom resource that we have defined in the that the operator understands how to translate to native Kubernetes resources to deploy a wasmCloud cluster. And so this wasmCloud cluster at the end of the day is the wasmCloud, instead of being like a binary when running local, is running as a container. So all of your WebAssembly components, all of your capability providers run inside of that single container, allowing you to essentially run essentially run one container, but really densely pack that wasmCloud container with your WebAssembly apps. And that just plugs right into the existing Kubernetes and container tooling, which is super nice. And the operator provides that bridge. So, my spiel being over. Vance, I saw you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah. So if I deploy a Wattom app, how can my Kubernetes apps see it?
Yeah, so there are actually a couple of cool things that you can do here. One thing is that in the notion of the Wasm Cloud operator, there is essentially an exposing function in kube control to be able to retrieve Wattom applications with kube control. So you can work with Wattom directly using the kube control API. And Vance, to answer your question maybe a little more specifically around connectivity of applications, when we are creating these applications in Kubernetes, whenever there is an HTTP server, essentially an HTTP server that spins up. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan, but the process that the operator goes through when an HTTP server launches is by running a service in order to make that available to other Kubernetes things inside of its own networking layer. And then, like Dan said, you can port forward to it if you wanted to hit it locally like a pleb.
I have a more complete example if we want to run through it. I'm not sure if we have where we are on time.
Oh yeah, that
I,
sounds
I think we've
great.
got
Let's.
another great question over in chat though
Okay.
around Yakin asks about handing the operator signing key is a big ask. If it's a shared infrastructure, is it possible to reduce this to one or more account signing keys, Dan?
And
Operator, what level, Jochen? Because we don't really ask for it unless you're talking about the
Just
uh
a cluster.
all the secrets.
Isn't that the cluster? Oh, cluster seed. Okay, that's just the identifier.
Yeah,
I kind of
different
mixed it up
thing.
with the operator.
Hold on, I think
Yeah,
my
not the
audio just
operator.
went out.
That's fine. Public key is fine. Yeah, take it back.
yeah, and this key, Jochen, is definitely just it's the Wasm Cloud specific one for invocations. So I do agree that handing
Yeah.
credentials around um uh would be a big ask. But this one specifically at least is something that is pretty okay to or from our perspective pretty okay to ask here. Does that make sense? Or is that the one you were talking
Yeah,
about?
totally
I
makes
guess I
sense.
should
No,
have
no,
switched.
I could mix it up because and I actually said it right. I run the operator. I took the wasm cloud cluster seed, and that's not
Nice.
critical. It's all good.
Yeah, too much overlap with operator and like component, a lot of names thrown around.
Well, yeah, Dan, I think sticking with kind of our precedent, I think like having the first 30 minutes of the call for demos and things are great, especially because I kind of got started a little bit late. So I think we've definitely got some time.
Well, give me 1 second while I get uh this dialed in real quick. I just need to bump the size of my terminal,
That'll
usual
give me
demo
time to give you
problems.
co-host. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. I should be ready now. So, okay. I'm gonna run through what is a slightly more complete maybe example to kind of like see how this all sort of fits together. Kind of in something that looks a little bit more like production. Rearrange my screens because doing this real quick. Here we go. Should be able to see all that. This okay? Yes, perfect. So what I'm going to show you is actually using the operator on this diagram shows two, but it's actually or actually no, it is correct on 3 different Kubernetes clusters. Basically running at the same time, 3 independent deploys of the operator, all connected by the same NAS clusters, basically. And the idea is basically what we can do is have from external sources, right? We can have something that's more like a geo load balancer, right? Or GeoIP. That's kind of outside of the scope of wasmCloud in this particular instance, but we could do something like that and direct traffic to a particular Kubernetes cluster, right? Based on sort of where the source of the traffic is coming from. We can have the same application deployed in both parts, right? And then we can have that connected back to a third Kubernetes cluster in order to sort of query a remote capability, if you will, right? And this app could also, or this cluster can also be serving the same application. In my example, it actually does. So what this application is, it's fairly straightforward. It just serves a website. And that website takes a little bit of information from your user agent and stores that back using a key value provider in Valkey, actually using the Redis KV provider that we have, right? And so in Wadum, just to kind of show you what the inventory looks like, actually I'll show you get hosts first. So this is live. This is all actually running in GKE right now. So I've got 3 different hosts running. I get their inventory. They're all part of the same lattice, obviously. So if I get their inventory, this is the actual application that I'm running. And I guess I can get you the Wadum application as well, which would show the same thing. But on the one that's running in US East, that's this cluster here. We're running the the component that's serving our web page, which is the only component we have here. The key value Redis provider, which is bridging in that Valkey installation. We run a custom provider to actually get you instance metadata, which provides like the region, because components you can't really get that information, right? Because you'd have to have environment variables and sort of external connectivity. So I wrote a WIT contract basically to just like expose that generically, and it happens to be the implementation for GCP. And then there's also an HTTP server provider, right? So that when you actually connect to the port, right, that this component wants to listen on, right, it actually handles your request and spits it back out. In the other 2 clusters, right, and this one's like poorly tagged, but this one actually has its region. This one's actually running in US West 4, I think, or US West 1, sorry, of the Oregon data center. Same exact deploy minus the key value Redis provider, and same in EUS 1, just to kind of like distribute this all out everywhere. And show this off running, right? If I could go back to my browser, if it would let me, there we go. So this is the site live, right? I'm just gonna hit it a couple times. I don't know if you can see a little tab at the top refreshing. Arc doesn't show you a great view of that. But you can see the numbers sort of like slowly tick up, right? But what's cool about this, of course, is if I switch to one of my West regions, right? I show you what pods are running, right? You can see I just got a wasmCloud cluster pod, which is the same thing that Brooke showed you. If I do kubectl get WHC YAML, WHC is the short form for getting the CRD that Brooke showed you installed, right? This is the same, this is the config as part of the same lattice, right? I'm going to go ahead and actually just kill this deployment. What was it? My wasmCloud cluster, is that what I called it? Yeah. By the way, K is my short form for a wasmCloud cluster. Or no, sorry, a kubectl command. It's just a lot easier when you're doing too much in Kubernetes. But anyway, so now that I killed that, I killed the deployment in US West, and you can see I keep just refreshing the page and it all just still works, like nothing happened, right? Like
Dan,
Yes,
can we refresh the page?
you can refresh the page if you'd like. The URL is here. Let me paste it in chat. If you'd like to all just slam my poor little component. But if you go ahead and start hitting this site, right, you can see if you're coming from the EU, you should see some of that tick up as well. But yeah, numbers go up, nothing happened, right? Like effectively from the client perspective, right, everything has worked, which is nice because and what this shows is, obviously we're doing some magic with sort of the initial set of load balancing to get our traffic to wasmCloud. That's just networking. But the magic here, right, is the fact that I basically just took stuff down, right? wasmCloud just works, distributed everything around, or all the traffic around, right? And everything just worked, nothing happened from the client perspective. And the fact that, I'm able to deploy a single WADA manifest to effectively 3 different Kubernetes clusters, and it all just, deploys. I don't have to do anything special. So that's pretty much the demo. If you're interested in the code, it's over at github.com, Cosmonic Labs resiliency demo. I'll paste the link in chat, right? It's just something that we kind of threw together to show some of this stuff off. There's a couple different implementations of this metadata component or the provider that I showed off, right? There's one for fly.io, there's one for GCP, there's one for Kind, there's also one for DigitalOcean. Pull request welcome if you wanted to just implement it. The WIT definition is pretty straightforward. Here we go. Just in this metadata.wit, right? So it's like pretty easy to hack on. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Questions?
So Dan, I think the code, if we were to pull up the microservice on the back end, what is powerful about this demo is that it just scales infinitely horizontally and the developer doesn't need to know anything about it, right? Like all the magic is baked into the architecture of wasmCloud here. If you wanted to run this on 1 or 100 or 1,000 edge locations, we just scale linearly, right? There's no additional steps or re-architecture or anything else needed, right?
Yeah, basically, like, so what you could do, for example, like if you brought up 5 new clusters in GKE, right? And then installed the operator and installed the CRD to define to actually connect wasmCloud hosts, right? Your apps would just spin up. There's nothing you have to do, right? As long as they have all the correct labels or whatever you happen to be specifying in your manifest, it all just works, right? And if you lose the cluster, oh no, again, we're sort of offloading that in this case to Google Cloud's like global load balancing. But that ingress traffic would get redirected anyway to wherever it needs to go. And the application itself, it doesn't make a difference, right? It's just going to sit there and serve traffic. You can shift it around wherever you need to. You could, if your capability provider goes down, or you can make that turn on somewhere else, right? Depends on how you end up defining the WADA manifest.
There was a question in the chat that just it was a quick one, so I just wanted to bring it up for the stream. You asked if we were running NATs in Kubernetes itself or outside, like in a VM, and at least in my demo, we are running it in Kubernetes itself. Doesn't matter. You could run it outside if you wanted as a VM. But the NATS Helm chart is a really nice way just to stand up a whole NATS cluster. And then the use of leaf nodes alongside the wasmCloud host container itself does a really good job of keeping all of the NATS traffic local to the wasmCloud host.
Yeah, with NATS and Kubernetes, the concern is actually like Kubernetes itself is fine, right? It's really just making sure that from an operational perspective, it's doing all the right things. So if you're using the Helm chart, it should be okay. There should not be a performance impact. You may have some other problems, like in like heavily trafficked NATS clusters, if you didn't give it volumes that have high enough IOPS. And that's mostly a Jetstream thing, and it depends how much Jetstream you're using. For our stuff, it should be fairly lightweight because we mostly just use key value and, it's mostly just sort of like reading that stuff every once in a while. But the tuning should all be like pretty much work out of the box.
Well,
All
these
right,
are great demos. Vance, I hope that they're helpful for you heading into TM Forum next week.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think we probably have time. Maybe do one more question before we move on to the rest of the call. If anybody want to raise their hand or have another question they want to throw out there?
Dan, do you mind describing the operator feature about creating Kubernetes services and why you would want that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things about the operator that we started to work on pretty much immediately when we created it was the ability to automatically generate services for providers, right? Or rather for applications, right? Why would we want to do that? So the reason is to really be able to bridge in other things that may be running on Kubernetes so they can call your wasmCloud applications and be none the wiser, right? Right now, it only works with HTTP server components, or rather providers, sorry. But it automatically create a service, and I can show that off real quick if I share my screen again. Oops. I know how to type eventually. So this resiliency demo, because that's what I called the actual name of the application. That's actually automatically generated. So if I do, oops, this guy, I'll put some YAML. Oh, there it is. This is automatically generated based on the fact that we have our HTTP provider listening on port 8080, right? And so that way, other things that are running in your cluster, right, can then start actually being able to talk to your wasmCloud applications, and they don't even know anything about it, right? Just HTTP. We see it as kind of like a way to onboard all this stuff a lot more effectively if you are already running a whole bunch of stuff on Kubernetes. And so we have ideas on how to actually take that and basically allow you to, in your WADA manifest, be able to actually customize all of those services, maybe be able to add ingresses, be able to tune it as if it were something in Kubernetes. The idea will probably be there'll be custom traits potentially, or more than likely policies, I think, in OAM speak. But we need to go ahead and actually write up an issue about it and just get it implemented. So stay tuned for that, hopefully in the next month or so. But if you need it sooner, definitely would love to hear about it.
Yeah, I know that a couple people on the call are using the operator now, at least in testing, development, production, like different stages there. But it's really cool to see this work, and I think it really illustrates the right balance. Like when you're working with Kubernetes here for wasmCloud, like you're really working with the infrastructure layer of like, I need my NATs, I need my WADM, like here's how many hosts I'm going to run. And then as soon as you get all that in place, like you're working with application level requirements with wasmCloud. It really, I mean, to me, it feels like the right separation of concerns there. So it's really, I think that the resiliency demo just kind of nails that down, of like what it actually looks like to run that application. We'll make sure to get all of those links put out in the chat and in the notes, so that folks can refer to that afterwards. I think we should go ahead and move on since we've got about 20 minutes left and there are a couple more discussion items. They shouldn't take too long, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to give it justice. So let me go ahead and share my screen
Brooks,
again.
I have to jump out a little early, but I had one small item I wanted to drop on people, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you need to share screen? I'll just give you co-host.
No, oh no,
Dude.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm just pulling up the link to share with people. So I'm just letting people know I've already done it once. So yeah, Bailey already did it for me before I got there. The We're getting very close to finalizing the WASI messaging interface, so we can move it to phase 2 and everything. Now we've been using, because it wasn't ready, a custom wasmCloud messaging interface for the time being, and we'll obviously create adapters and everything for this once we get there. But I want to make sure that I know there's multiple people on this call who are using messaging in their current applications or are testing it in their deployments of wasmCloud. And so I would love any feedback you have here on this PR. So please feel free to go in here and drop comments. It's not like don't be worried about dropping in here. We can get a little bit deep sometimes, but don't worry about that. The comments are what matters, because it's really good to. I've already been pointing out that there's people who use our messaging interface, and that's where I'm getting some of my ideas from here. But any of you who are doing this and have opinions on how this should look, or concerns about where it's going, please let us know, because this is quickly heading towards becoming the 0.2.0 WASI messaging. Actually, it might be 0.10. I can't remember which one we had already done. And so then we're going to have this actually out for people to use here soon. So please drop your comments there. That's all I had. I just knew that people here were actually doing it, and we're the only people doing WebAssembly and messaging right now in the WASM community at large. So I figured wasmCloud users would probably have something to say or opinions, or it's also okay for like, this all looks great to me. I mean, that would make me happy too. But just whatever you find, let me know, because we're getting close to finishing that and merging it all in. So that was all I had there. But yeah, please drop any feedback you have on there, and let me know if you have any questions too.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you so much for kind of pushing this forward. I don't know if we brought it up in a previous community call, but I know that I took a look maybe like a week or two ago. And like the updated WASI key value interface was awesome after getting in additional like rounds of feedback and taking into account like the wasmCloud key value interface at the time. WASI key value is so much better than wasmCloud key value was at the time, and WASI messaging looks really nice. I guess I'll key this up for a future community call, but we should talk pretty in depth about what changes once this lands, once we get into the host implementation of a new version of, well, essentially we support wasmCloud messaging right now, but we'll need to support, we'll add support for WASI messaging as well. And that'll be since we're not changing an interface, this should be a pretty nice backwards compatible change. So we'll queue that up for a future community call. Get too deep into it now. Okay, so moving forward in the discussion, one thing that I wanted to call out, because I know that a lot of folks use OTel for tracing logging metrics with wasmCloud. We noticed a couple of issues with our trace propagation this week, and we did update to a newer version of the downstream OpenTelemetry OTLP crate that we use for wasmCloud. And that actually did, under the hood, change the behavior of when you provide a default URL for an exporter, whether or not it expects for you to provide the path, so like /v1/traces. So if you are already overriding your endpoint, this shouldn't actually affect you directly, because you could have already been pointing it at the correct URL. But this is something that we fix in the host essentially to Jonas did an awesome job fixing this, such that based on the URL that you provide, we'll either append the v1/traces, or we'll cut it off, like if it's a gRPC endpoint, for example. And this will either land in the next patch version of the host, if we can cherry pick that in a nice patch way, or just in wasmCloud 1.1. But if you see an issue with tracing or logging where you just see, hey, there's an error 404, This hasn't actually been released in a version of the host yet, so you shouldn't have ever seen this unless you were running from main. But just in case, if you see it, that's what it is. In addition, we had a great issue filed by Ritesh. Thank you, Ritesh, for bringing this to our attention around the tracing endpoint not propagating all of the way. And we actually found that this was due to propagating traces through the component boundary. So when you call a component, when the component actually makes a call to the wasmCloud host, we needed to make sure that we stored that trace context and propagated that all the way through. Now I have a couple screenshots in here of example traces. I think if I click on it, I'll blind everyone instantly, so I won't. But this is essentially what the trace looks like for HTTP server to component to client. And then we had a bug fix for NATs as well, which we were able to get that all reconnected. And we're going to be releasing new versions of each capability provider to bring in that fix, and then wasmCloud as well. So if you were seeing any issues with traces getting disconnected, this is probably why, and we'll have a fix out for that shortly. I just wanted to call attention to that because there's a good bit of activity in our repo this week around it. If folks have any questions around OTel. Nice. Okay, so I really liked Liam's idea a couple weeks ago to do essentially a docs page of the week. And so I've expanded that into something that we used to call, for all of you OGs, the wasmCloud community call out, where we call attention to some of the issues that we have in wasmCloud, especially ones that are marked with a good first issue label and, essentially high value for the project, but quick pickups for first contributors. So a lot of these end up focusing around individual pieces of wasmCloud, Wash, or Wadum, or crates. And this issue is all about supporting debug compilation for Rust projects with Wash build. Wash build by default builds release binaries. These are optimized Rust binaries. This is what we want to be doing when we're packaging components and providers for running in an efficient way. But I noticed when I was iterating on some of the OTel stuff, it'd be really nice if I could build this in debug mode because it's a good bit faster to build components and providers in debug mode, specifically that very last step of linking, which is a little annoying to have to keep waiting on. So I filed this issue, 2298. This is a great one for folks to dip their feet in. If you're a repeat contributor, this one will really help getting to know where we actually have some of the code for Wash build. And if you haven't worked with Rust before and you wanted to contribute in the open source, this is a good one as well, just to modify some Rust things. So I added a little bit of additional context around where we do some logic for building the components or providers. So if you are interested in the open source world of taking this one, feel free to just drop a comment. I can assign it to you. And then I really love iterating on draft PRs. So please feel free to open up a draft PR if you have questions or trying to get something working. I won't put the onus on anybody to sign up now. I wanted to throw that out there in general. And then for the next section, I wanted to call out the documentation page of the week, testing Wadum manifests faster with Wash. This is a new page in our developer guide under the workflows section. And Wash 0.29, which is releasing as we speak, as long as I did the action correctly. You have a couple additional utilities in Wash for validating and deploying applications quicker. So if you're working on in the context of an application, we now have the Wash app validate command. Now this does make sure that it is valid YAML and it actually parses as a Wadum application. But it also checks for common issues like if you try to link and you misspell WASI HTTP as WASI HTTP, then this will actually find that and say, hey, this doesn't look like an interface that we know about. Maybe you meant WASI HTTP, things like that. So Wash App Validate should be a nice little step. Build it into your You can build it into your CI pipelines or just run it locally. This will be really nice to just kind of catch it before you deploy that manifest. There's also a new utility with wash up, which is very similar to or very inspired by like a Docker Compose dash F up type of workflow where you can run wash up and provide a WADM manifest to be automatically deployed as soon as the infrastructure stands up. This is really nice. We'll probably start using this in a couple of our examples and like quick starts because a lot of what that looks like is running wash up and then running wash app deploy. So doing it all in one, super nice. And then the replace option for wash app deploy will actually attempt to. Now I know that some things are changing in WADM around what we do for individual manifests and their versions, but this one for right now will give a nice utility to be able to replace the currently running version of your application. And I believe Victor is the author of these documentation and a lot of these, I think all of these features, Victor, I think you ended up doing. So huge kudos to you. And this last command here, the cargo watch with wash app deploy, is really nice. It essentially gives you this like hot reload flow of, whenever you have a change, you can redeploy your WADM manifest, which is super, super nice. I've been getting used to cargo watch recently, and it is a really cool utility essentially to do that hot reload. Victor, is there anything that I missed here that you wanted to put in a comment of? Just want to make sure that we highlight this page for folks who want to check it out when they get 0.29.
I was gonna say, nope, you got it. That's pretty much all of it. I mean, if people want to try it out, and some feedback would be great on like what your normal workflow looks like and if this helps. If you have other ways you normally try and run things as well, like I know you have some other things that make like for example, wash call, right? Makes sort of invoking components and stuff easier. But we also, or I also at least look forward to landing some changes to the test utils to just make it easier to like test your providers and test your components and stuff like that.
Yeah, go ahead, Joachim.
Oh yeah, so this wash replace app replace is really helpful, and I realized that with the operator that actually requires you to advance the version number, at least in my setup, so it collides. So could that be a default? Because it's at least in development, it's always kind of you try to redeploy, and it kind of you have to advance it, and it's another commit, or you bake it in. It's not a good cycle. So maybe that could be the default.
Yeah, this is a piece of feedback we get off. Oh, Victor, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so actually Taylor did some work in WDAM to remove the need for versions. So the versions so it's like, this is what Brooks mentioned, that it's like almost overlapping with this replace thing, but just not quite. Like in my opinion, like there are two different ways of kind of like getting at the same problem, but I think you should be able to, yeah. Brooks has it up now, but you should basically be able to remove your version and then just make sure to add it back before you commit or whatever, or for the next version. But I think this will fix your problem a bit better in the Kubernetes use case.
Yeah, I think that both can and should exist at the same time, mostly because this PR essentially what we'll do is if you don't, let me stop sharing. If you don't supply a version, then WADM will automatically assign you a lexicograph, whatever, a ULID, a unique ID for the version. So that's great for just like rapid iterating, you're just working with it over time. But if you have your own versioning scheme and you prefer like to stick with a Symver style version, then you can use the wash app replace to do or deploy with replace to essentially do the same thing and just preserve the same version when you're locally iterating. I think both of them will be great. And WADM 0.12 is coming in the new version of Wash as well. So or in WASH 0.29. So you all should be able to try out both of them at the same time.
Now, let's caveat that I don't think I've tried it with the operator since we've released the new version of Wattom. It should just work but I don't know if the actual client ended up changing. I don't think it did, but fair warning, if you run into it and it doesn't work, just let us know and we'll fix it. I can try and also maybe see after this call, but just fair warning is all.
Yeah, it currently says the version is not available. The requested version is not available, which is confusing because it is actually, but it tries to cannot override it, and so gives an error message there. And then I figured it out in advancing. Fine. So thanks.
Yeah, Yakin, would you mind trying? Would you mind trying that? If you want to sign up to be a guinea pig, if you want to try removing your version, and if you still get that error, we could.
Yeah,
I can try.
Yeah, let's take this one off in Slack, but we can keep working on that one. I know we're getting kind of to the end of the call here, and outside of the announcement from Taylor around WASI messaging, Vance, I know that you have a pretty big event coming up where you're going to be talking about wasmCloud. Would you like to share a little bit more detail around what you're going to be doing? I can see you lounging, but you are muted, at least in Zoom. Vince, you're not talking right now, are you? I just want to make sure. Maybe not. That's okay. Oh, he might be hitting some Zoom issues. We'll give Vance another minute or so since I know that we started about 5 past the hour or so. And because I want to make sure he had time to talk about the TM form, which is a really cool use case what they've been building for wasmCloud. This is the time where if we just all wait, Bailey will inevitably fill the space with fun WebAssembly news instead of having the silence. So that's what I'm depending on.
But Taylor already got my cool WebAssembly news. We've aligned WASI messaging, like what he posted, and is asking for feedback around what we'd already gotten consensus in for WASI key value. I don't know the status of WASI Blob Store, but it seems like that one people generally always liked, and probably just needs another look over now that we've established a few new conventions for how we like to name and refer to things like config. Whew, okay, let's go, Vance.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We gave thumbs up.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
yes.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Yeah, so I'm heading to Copenhagen for the. No, I don't think that shared correctly. Oh, maybe it did. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, we can see it.
Right. Heading to Copenhagen for this annual show for the TIP Forum, which is the industry association for the telcos, around all the software that runs the telcos. Less about networking and more about charging and billing and provisioning and all of that. Right. So we've got this bunch of partners, operators like Orange and Vodafone and Etisalat and MTN, and then Comviva, Wave9, 6Scale are vendors. So it is focused on WebAssembly. This is the second year. We did one last year. It generated a bunch of interest from the tech folks, at least. And the challenge that we're addressing this year, we're really saying, okay, well, we need a unified approach to handle IT infrastructure. We're using Kubernetes, or at least Kubernetes is, people are somewhere on their journey into Kubernetes. And now we're moving the cheese and we're saying, well, that's not the end of the road. And so we need to come up with a unified approach to doing IT infrastructure that includes the edge and the core, and really takes into account the continuous evolution of all this technology. And what we're focused on is orchestrating the workloads above that. So it's really, we care about application lifecycle management, but these applications are going to live across a very distributed network out to the edge. And, you know, edge, some people to edge means a metro. Other people, edge means a cell site. Other people, edge means a residential gateway. You know, the optical networking terminal that is also a little Linux machine. And some people think edge is wearables, but those are the challenges. And so we're introducing people to WebAssembly, and we have this concept called the ODA Canvas, which is Kubernetes based. And so what we're doing in TM Forum is we've got standardized open APIs, we've got like almost 100 of these standard open API REST interfaces that the industry is standardizing on for solving their integration problems. But what ODA does on top of that is it standardizes really what the applications are. So there's something called a product catalog, and we've agreed about what a product catalog does, what APIs that it produces and consumes, and what behaviors that it has. And so we then have an architecture of software applications that are kind of Lego blocks, and all operators use some combination from different vendors and whatever, and that's ODA. This diagram here is really talking about the wasmCloud operator and showing these things labeled components. These are actually ODA components. So an ODA component is one of these standardized applications, right? Like a product catalog or a resource order management or something. And typically these are being deployed in a Kubernetes canvas. They're some sort of Kubernetes managed deployment or whatever. And so here what we're doing is we're using the wasmCloud operator, running wasmCloud, and then these little green components are ODA components doing the same sort of thing. That's a product catalog, it's a service inventory, whatever, but they're implemented in WebAssembly and they're running in the WebAssembly canvas. And we demonstrated that last year. We had a little tiny cluster of embedded systems running wasmCloud hosts, and we wrote out. We ported these applications, these ODA components, and ran them as components. But what we're showing this year is that if you put it all together this way, then we can begin to, at an application management level, just be, it's all equivalent. It doesn't matter. The real trick really though comes in that our concept of an ODA canvas includes operators. So we've got these Kubernetes operators that recognize when a new component is added and then create a component object in KRM and communicate that to the API gateway. And it does a bunch of things that are specific to the ODA canvas concept. And now, though, with the WebAssembly operator, it's giving us a bridge so that we can create some equity between these WebAssembly implemented ODA components and the others. So it's going to make a great demonstration for people who aren't familiar with the technology, because they're going to really see that it fits well with what they're already doing. And so explaining to people about the concept of universal compute. And it's all about deployments. Like I said, edge means different things. And if edge is a residential gateway, you're not running Kubernetes cluster on it, right? So there's a bunch more considerations, and we end up with latitude in our options, what we're able to do, et cetera. And Orange have a couple amazing use cases that they're doing. I'm not going to apologize for these diagrams being small. You're not. It's really just meant as a teaser to come in and have a look at this. One is this purple gateway one. So that's a residential gateway where they're actually running wasmCloud components on the residential gateway as part of a distributed wasmCloud system. And the other one is really about it focuses on the securely distributing and running software. So if we're taking a piece of software from an ecosystem partner, and then which is being updated quite regularly, and then we're just going to deploy it and run it on our infrastructure, that's a bit of a security challenge, right? So how do we handle that? Well, WebAssembly is really giving us an answer to that. And so in this little demonstration here, we've got some VR goggles, and someone is using the is using VR and metaverse, right, to visit the store in the metaverse, and the partners are providing software that participates in that metaverse scenario. Yeah, and so that's basically what we're showing, and ultimately in the end, we are going to recommend that WebAssembly be put on the roadmap for ODA innovation. There's a new ODA innovation hub that's going to be spearheading that. So we're recommending it for the roadmap, and we're recommending that CSPs don't wait. Start looking at doing trials and doing limited production rollouts of WebAssembly-based technology. And you know, as I showed, Orange are really big on wasmCloud. Vodafone are pretty much accept that that's the alternative of choice for doing WebAssembly as opposed to the other infrastructure solutions that they have today. And that's what we're presenting.
Fans, this is awesome. Thank you so much for running through the explanation and taking up some of those diagrams. I won't monopolize any more time. Is this going to be streamed at all? Like for folks who won't be in Copenhagen, will we be able to watch it or maybe watch the recording afterwards?
No. I wish I could apologize for them, but it's not a truly open sort of organization, right? So there's a lot that is, but there's a lot that isn't. And unfortunately, yeah, no.
Well, it's still really awesome to see the what you all have put together. Maybe I can harass you into doing a demo for the community call or something later.
I think we're going to have an opportunity to call in from the floor for this call, so we'll see.
Nice. Well, I look forward to that. I know that we are past the time, but it's just too cool to stop. Do folks have any other questions or any questions for Vance before we call it good for this week? All right, everyone. Well, awesome community meeting. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. Vance, it's really awesome to see what you're putting together with the WebAssembly canvas with Orange and Vodafone. Dan, thanks for kind of swinging in with the resiliency demo to really nail some of the operator bits home. And then Bailey, Taylor, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I could just keep going. If anybody has any additional follow-ups or questions, please feel free to come join us on the wasmCloud Slack. I know that a lot of you are in there, but if you're not, slack.wasmcloud.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe or something, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks for coming.